spiritguides.co.uk network radio. Today's guest is Dr. Kevin Ross Emery. Dr. Kevin's work in the esoteric field and spiritual counselling is as diverse as they come, with multiple books published, most notably a book detailing a lost form of ancient Reiki channeled from a 5,000-year-old Tibetan monk called Wei Chi, and a book called Experiment Earth, which chronicles the lost civilizations of Atlantis, Lemuria, and the reason world events have played out ever since. Dr. Kevin is also an established and experienced spiritual coach and counsellor, helping children and adults with ADD and ADHD. When you do your trance channeling, what entities was it that brought through the information regarding the Atlantis stuff?
I had a few of them, actually.
Yeah.
And part of it was when I first started channeling, my first requirement was, because you want to make agreements if you do this sort of thing, that they had to say things of value. And the primary voice of Experiment Earth was an extraterrestrial named Ki, K-I, and he always says that you can call him Ki. If I'm not careful, I'm going to fall into trance channel on you. I can feel him around me. And he loves being interviewed on the radio show. We had a radio show person interview him once.
Yeah.
Man went screaming from the room. It was in person.
Wow.
So anyway, Ki was an extraterrestrial, is an extraterrestrial, and he started talking about how the Earth was an experiment.
Okay.
And I was going. Go ahead.
No, go for it. Yeah, go.
Oh, yeah. And so Ki said that we can call him Ki. And interestingly enough, he says this because he says that we're a name-obsessed little species, and we need to find something to call him, or we won't be happy. And that he's part of a race that he is like the last survivor of. And they were kind of like observers. They were energy. They don't have a physical body, and they don't have an emotional body. When they were created by what we would call God, it had they were closer to angels than we were, so to speak.
Okay.
They were like the scientific brain of God. And in energy, in spirit and intellect, they would travel around and they looked at all of the different things that had been created in the universe, all the different alien races and how things evolved and how things went on. And now, unlike the angels, and this is some of the information, and I had some angels. Metatron speaks in the book Experiment Earth. Gabriel speaks. Ariel speaks. Ki is the primary voice. We get some messages from the Native American Council of Grandmothers. The book itself actually is 6 weeks out of my life. This is actually a travel journey where I was going to go teach a class on Atlantis and Lemuria based on information that I had researched and studied with a little bit of intuitive that I had gotten, but I was more looking at the Edgar Cayce stuff and some other things. And these guys came in and filled in the holes. Like, why were there four root races? Why were the angels created? And why was Earth an experiment? And why is Earth different than any other planet that God created? And so these all come up in different places, in the book, because the book is a conversation between myself and my life partner at the time, as we got off an intuition cruise that I had been teaching on in the Caribbean. And we're driving up to Columbia, South Carolina, to teach a class on Atlantis and Lemuria. And the 6-week journey, which brought us to a Native American sweat lodge, brought us to Atlanta, Georgia, where I went into channel at a deli and started channeling at a deli, Ki, who does not have a quiet voice. So all of these people in the Deep South are looking at suddenly this very elongated face and this very loud, booming alien voice speaking.
Yeah.
So, but he talked about why Earth was an experiment, and he went back to Lemuria, to Atlantis. Lemuria came first.
So how long ago
Mm-hmm.
would that be?
Well, Atlantis was like 25,000 years ago. 25,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, we're talking about Atlantis. We talk about Lemuria going back 150, 200,000 years more. I mean, you know, it goes way back. And what happened is when the planet became fertile for life, and there was all sorts of life, and the God gene or God or spirit or whatever you want to call it. I try not to get into all of the religious political bullshit. Whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it God. Was seeding the planet. It was to watch the process of evolution. If you just put something in, you know, God is like the ultimate scientist. Put something in and let's observe and see what happens. Parts of God, you know, and God had started, you know, had created other species. There were other things. There are races that are older than man that existed in the universe, races that died out and things like this. And each one was a marker in the evolution of God, God's self, of learning. Because how does a God learn?
Through experience, through us, in a way, isn't it? Through the...
Yes.
Yeah.
So originally, Lemuria was here to be an observation place where God split off part of God's self into like cells, into observers. That was a race that, you know, was like, at that point is when man was closest to being angelic, so to speak.
Yeah. So were they physical?
For lack of a better term.
Were they energy, physical, or a mixture of both?
No, it was not physical at all in Lemuria at the beginning. Not for souls. And I always look at soul as a cell in the body of God. So if you think of a cell in the human body, which is both the body and not the body, and it is the whole body, but it's not the whole God. You know, everything that exists in the cell exists everywhere else in the DNA. Well, so soul is actually a cell in the body of God. So these souls were spun out to be observers in Lemuria in this experiment, kind of like an away team on a Star Trek.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen Star Trek, but you know, kind of like an away team. They're trying to be observing what's going on the planet.
So what are they observing exactly? They
were observing the evolution of actually the early plants, the early animals, what was going on, of how did these things evolve that were made from the matter of God, but were not cells from the body of God, and there is a difference. And so as that was happening, what happened is the souls learned the ability to go in and actually become one with the animals, so that they could go in and they could experience what it was like to have a physical experience that an animal would have. What did it feel like to feel cold? Because if you don't have a body, how do you know what cold is? How do you know what hunger is? How can you know these things if you don't have a body? So what happened is in Lemuria, we started being able to go in, meld in a form with the bodies to experience cold, hunger, mating, these sort of things. What happened is that that we started to get addicted to sensual pleasures, to what it was like to feel. And then that scientific part took over, and we started creating some of what were the early atrocities. We had animals that would never mate, and actually force birth to happen, which is what some of the early mythical creatures were actually Lemurian creatures that were created through this experience of going of being into the animal and forcing the animal to do something out of its natural instinctive thing.
So was this still Lemuria, or was this kind of moving into Atlantis period now?
Well, the first time it happened in Lemuria. And one of the things is that in there, we basically got slapped down. The souls that were watching were still complete souls, and they were told, don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do this. You're messing with it. You're messing with the whole evolutionary process. You're putting things. Stop doing it. Souls became addicted to the ability of the power they had over the animals, and that's what ended up creating